Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan from Gamereactor, and today I'm talking with two of the lead developers of Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. Hello, thank you for talking with us. So, first of all, at the presentation here, you just talked about the Deus Ex universe as a whole.
Yep.
Can you tell us a bit about what that is and what we're going to see of different product lines in that universe?
Well, for us, it always starts with the AAA games, right? Like Deus Ex: Mankind Divided, and we had Human Revolution before. And our goal is to really take this fictional world and bring it to other mediums, like graphic novels. Like we have a new series of graphic novels that are coming out. Actually, there are three issues out there, and the fourth and fifth one are coming. And you learn more about Adam Jensen and how he got in the task force, the organization he works with in Mankind Divided. We also have a novel that is coming called Black Light by James Swallow, the same guy who wrote Icarus Effect for Human Revolution. And in this in this novel, we're also exploring what happened to Adam Jensen after the events of Panchea after Human Revolution. So we're bridging a little bit the gap between the 2 years that happened between the two games. We also have other initiatives because that is the fiction, and we're trying to expand the fiction, but we're trying to bring it in the real world, tangible. Like we have figurines, we have a line of clothes and everything inspired by the art of Deus Ex and everything. And even like recently, we struck a kind of a partnership with Open Bionics to create Adam Jensen's arm prosthetic that is going to be available for kids, women, and men very soon. Like the blueprints are going to be out there, and people are going to be able to build their own Adam Jensen arm, fully functional and everything. So for us, it's really important to expand the world of Deus Ex in the fictional realm, but also we want to bring it more and more into the real world because we always say that Deus Ex is a window to the future, and we're trying to anticipate what's coming tomorrow in our games. And when reality catches with our fictional universe, we like to bring it all together and everything and make Deus Ex feel real.
And as a narrative developer, how do you keep all of this new stuff in line with sort of the canon, so to speak?
Well, one of my roles is not only to oversee the stories of the games themselves, but actually to work with our partners who are creating the comic books and who are writing the novels, and kind of work with them on the story front. And so, like presenting, hey, we really like to have a story that's based around this theme and these characters, or we'd like to kind of really look at the first mission that Adam Jensen did with the task force. So I kind of present that to the writers who are going to be working on these projects. They come back, pitch the ideas back, and we work with them to make sure that they stay in line with what we want in the franchise if they're going off, or if maybe they came up with an idea that we're like, that's a really great idea, but that's already being done in this book. So let's change that. And then what ends up happening is the characters that we've introduced in the game go into their stories. They introduce new stories, and then because I'm fully aware of all of what's going on in the universe, we can pull those characters back in to the main game experiences, and through emails or through side quests or through things like that. So it kind of all blends together into one big universe.
But we have to be really thorough and follow everything we do to make sure that we're maintaining the consistency. So sometimes it can be a lot of work and headaches. Yeah.
Yes.
So you just showed a really nice new trailer. There was a lot of live action in it. Are we going to see some live action stuff in the Deus Ex universe?
It'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
It'd be fun.
But for now, it's jokes apart. It's just a piece of advertising for the game to explain what the theme of the game is in a very, I would say, mass market way.
Yeah, but I also really think it conveyed the universe really well. It's very emotional also. So, but in this universe, how would you say the new game fits in, and where does the story take us in this game?
Well, it's 2 years after Human Revolution, and at the end of the last game, there was a huge tragedy that happened where millions of people died, on both sides, augmented and not augmented. And now Mankind Divided picks up 2 years after, and this is the aftermath. Now, suddenly augmented people are not seen necessarily as the bright future for mankind. Now they're seen as a threat to a lot of people, and there's a lot of division, and there's a lot of people that are they fear that the tragedy that happened in the last game will happen again. So now we're going into a game where Adam Jensen is kind of a stranger in a strange land, because when he goes in the city of Prague and walking, people see him as an augmented person, a potential danger. But when you go in Golem City, which is in the outskirts of Prague, and it's a ghetto for augmented, and he goes and he walks there, and people are like, dude, you don't belong here. You're all shiny and all good-looking kind of guy, and therefore there's always this feeling of not belonging anywhere. But Adam Jensen, at the same time, he understands he's a tool into something bigger. He's augmented. He has his own powers, and unlike Human Revolution, where he was trying to cope with his new reality, in this game, he just let go, and he embraces what he is, and he's much more taking charge in that respect.
Yeah, because at the end of Human Revolution, he had spent the whole time kind of coming to grips with what had happened to him, this terror attack that happened to him, and caused him to be forced to be augmented. And he really needed to understand how that had happened. And by the end, he found that out and had to make a choice, not just for himself, but for the whole world. And now he's realized that life isn't as simple as that, and that you actually... it doesn't just turn overnight like that. When people we're humans, we're dealing with the emotions that we're doing. And so he's now reached a point where he's embraced his augmentations. He no longer feels uncomfortable with them. He's fully in charge. And he has a mission, because he says, I couldn't save the world because of what happened, but I know who's responsible, and my job is to find them. And I have become a tool who will find them to bring the justice that they deserve. So he starts this game with that kind of a focus, a little colder, a little more cynical, and very, very focused on his task. And he'll have to go through a journey and see what happens on this one.
Yeah, I talked to the art director a bit about this, but I really think that in this kind of futuristic storytelling, the interesting thing for me is the deep questions of what it is to be human being, the ethical gray zones and all this. What do you think is the new themes perhaps you're trying to investigate in this game?
We're always dealing with the transhumanism, and how does that change us and make us... what are we becoming with that? But what does it mean to be human is, of course, the big one. And for this, I think for us, we were one of the many themes we were looking at was reason versus emotion. As human beings, we're driven by emotion. We're driven by reason. So when you're dealing with a world that has been totally overturned like that, how is the best way to approach this tragic thing that happened? Are you going to view it with fear? Are you going to be paranoid? Are you going to push the segregation? Or are you going to try and look at it a bit more rationally and say, are there solutions out there that we can find that can calm this hysteria in a different light? So we're looking at that. We're also looking at the ideas of when you're in a chaotic situation like that, there's opportunity for people, and who's going to take that opportunity, and who's going to push it in whatever ways they want to.
Yep.
And how are we going to see these themes in the game as game mechanics? What kind of choices do we have as a player, ethical or otherwise?
Well, from a story perspective, a lot of what you're doing is we do have an overall story, and Jensen is on a quest to find the truth, as always. And so some of the things that he's going to have to do are to deal with different sides of that issue, to deal with different people who can help him get the answers that he needs. At times he'll be getting information from one group that might counter information and shed new light that he's getting from someone else. And the kind of choices that we're putting in front of you on this are the kind of choices of okay, if you've been told to go in and you've been told that the head of an organization is a terrorist, do you go in there and do you encounter him like a terrorist, and how do you do that? Or do you, because of countering information, maybe he is not a terrorist, is he? So it's up to you to kind of decide, how do I want to deal with this character, and what can I learn in the process of doing that? At some points there might be in the game moments in which characters and side quests are throwing some very important things at you that you have to make judgment calls between character A or character B, for example, and who do you save or who do you help and things like that.
And sometimes also it's how do you deal with that the topic at hand. Are you going to go in a killing spree, or will you try to help some people or stop some people through more legal channels or through more pacific approach and everything? So we're exploring the segregation and the different dilemmas of associated to that, like people being deported in ghettos and not having the right permit to stay in town or not, that kind of stuff. And how do you deal with that? Like, will you try to beat up the corrupt people who are trying to extort the victims, or are you just going to try to get the victims out of that hole without creating any disruption and things like that? So the players will have to play a little bit with the reason and the emotion across the game and through exploring the segregation theme.
So on the more conflict-oriented side of the game, you've always mixed a lot of mechanics, stealth and first-person shooter, and I guess that's still in here. Have you taken any new approach to the level design? You spoke more about the vertical side of the level, more important this time around.
Definitely. Level design has expanded quite a lot in the sense that we always had multi-path, multi-approach to different challenges, like in the last game, and this game is no different. It's the same philosophy, but we really wanted to explore more verticality. It's interesting for exploration. It's interesting also in terms of challenges with enemies, how you fight or how you decide to stealth, because you have more variables to take into account. We have enemies that have like super powerful augmentations too. They can jump high or not, and it changes the battlefield as well. So for us, it was really a natural progression to add that kind of layer to level design as a whole. In terms of the overall pillars themselves, it was also important to us to improve combat to make it as satisfying as stealth can be. I'm not saying that the two modes are equal or the same. They are totally different ways of playing, but for us what was really important is to make sure that each one of them is satisfying on its own. So stealth was already satisfying in Human Revolution, and Mankind Divided. We did a lot of things to improve combat, and a lot of these things also kind of improve stealth to a certain degree. So stealth is still like the good old stealth mechanics that we had, but there's more flexibility when you move around corners, the different augmentations that you can use. But we really wanted to push the combat forward to have a much more visceral experience, a faster pace combat experience, and with augmentations, like we have the Titan Shield that transforms you into a tank that you can go into the fray, and you can be hit by a lot of bullets before getting injured, and of course it consumes energy. We have Icarus Dash, where you can ram into enemies. We have all the gun arms, like the nano blades, the Peps gun, the Tesla gun arms, that allow you to go with the 1-2 punch. Like you can shoot and bam, the blade, or any gun arms you can have. So we also redesigned the control scheme to make sure that those augmentations would be easy to use and very quick to use. So you don't have to go anymore into a wheel. Oh, activate in the wheel the augmentation, be in game, use it. Oh, go back in the wheel, unactivate it, kind of stuff. So now you're all mapping it on the D-pad or on the shoulder button, and it's just like much more fast, much more fluid. So it doesn't change the balance in the sense that you can play the entire game combat, or you can play it fully stealth if you want. It's your call. Or you can go mix and match the way you feel. But when there's combat, it's much more satisfying, much more visceral than it was in Human Revolution. And that was a deliberate move that we made to make sure that it was as compelling.
Yeah, and can you tell us a bit about how you grow as a character in the game, how you develop and upgrade and that sort of stuff?
That is very similar to what we did in Human Revolution, in the sense that Adam Jensen, now there are some problems that happen at the beginning of the game, and at some point, I won't spoil anything, but he needs to relook at his system, and he's gaining experience point, and through those experience points, it unlocks praxis points, but he can also in the game world find praxis kits, which are kind of like automatic upgrades in which he can unlock his augmentations, and also is going to discover that he has some concealed experimental augs that is going to have the opportunity to play with them, but there will be consequences associated to that, and depending on how you want to play, you can manage to circumvent that or have to live with that without going into much details. It's going to be similar to Human Revolution, but we're going deeper in terms of the possibilities and how now suddenly even augmentations are part of the choice and consequence kind of philosophy.
And you as a narrative developer, how do you work to combine the narrative side with these kind of more combat mechanics and make them make sense within the universe?
I think one of the big challenges is to basically come up with the story first and then recognize that the way that the story will be experienced is different for every player based on their style of gameplay and the choices they make. And when you know that, then you start to embrace that, and you start to say, okay, so let's try and put ourselves in scenarios where it doesn't break the myth that much if you go into this environment and you kill everybody in it, as opposed to knocking them all out or stuff like that. And so you kind of always have to be aware of the combat possibilities. You always have to be aware of the things that Jensen can do as you're building this story, and know that how I get from point A to point B is really up to the player, and I need to know what point A and point B is in my story so that I can craft it in a way. And then always double check the dialogues and say, make sure that you didn't say something that totally defies how the player may have played that experience. So it comes down to both thinking on a conceptual level very high, but also getting down into the nitty-gritty of the details of the actual writing to ensure that you're not using the wrong details that don't transpire into someone else's experience of that game.
And you also introduced a whole new game mode to this game, and the Breach game mode. Can you just shortly tell us what is that?
What the hell is that, right? It's totally left field. Basically, we wanted to... we've been thinking about having kind of a challenge mode for many years now, and we didn't really have the opportunity to tackle this before. So on Mankind Divided, it was the right time, and we had the people to do it, the right people to do it, and we just wanted to explore something totally new, totally fresh, that is unexpected in the Deus Ex franchise. And as we were developing it, and of course we're a narrative-based kind of experience, and therefore we felt that we needed to have kind of a narrative component to Breach as well. So it's all part of the universe, it's all connected, it's all linked to a lot of things that I'm not going to talk today, but definitely for us it was to have an arcade twist on the Deus Ex gameplay pillars and everything. And basically you're just a ripper, like this kind of hacker in the virtual reality world where you're trying to extract the data, all the information big corporations can have, and expose it to the real world and everything. A little bit like Snowden, or a little bit like a Robin Hood, a digital Robin Hood, like you steal from the rich and give to the poor. So it's a way that those people believe that they can keep those big corporations honest, because they're hidden through a lot of laws, a lot of production systems, and the real people, they don't know exactly what's going on out there and everything. And those rippers are there mainly to make sure that those corporations stay in check, like they stay honest. And of course some rippers are going to do it for the money, for the bragging rights, but some are going to do it for the cause, for the good it can create. And basically it's the fantasy you go in. It's quite an arcade kind of game experience, but at the same time there's this narrative thread that unifies everything together.
So thematically they kind of plug their brain into the computer and
Sort
hack
of,
it,
yes,
sort of.
yes. And then the virtual reality. So it's like if you're taking Oculus Rift, you put it in your on your head, and you just go in that virtual world, and that virtual world is just a real representation or an artificial representation of all the data stored by those huge corporations. And if you can hack it and you can access it, you can bring it back in the real world. So it's kind of the idea behind it.
And can you sort of die in the real world if you sort of die in the virtual world?
You cannot die in the real world from dying in the. Basically, if you fail your objective, you'll get kicked out. But your avatar remains in that world. So you don't die, but the traces of you are still in there. So you could be tracked down and arrested by the Prague police or whoever. So you don't, as a Ripper, want that to happen. You want to leave with no traces.
Yeah, in Breach we don't actually do that. Don't worry, you can play at home, kids. It's safe. Police won't come for you.
Won't be SWAT showing up at your door.
That's it.
Sounds really good. So just finishing off here, you also have real-life virtual reality support for the game.
Well, it's a benchmark tool that we develop especially for PC players, so they can really double check if their rig is powerful enough to play Mankind Divided. And we provided this virtual reality tech demo so they can try their virtual reality helmets, and it's kind of cool. It's like you have those iconic locations that we built for the game, and since we're a game all about details, all about cluttering and all that kind of stuff, like just being in the middle of those rooms and looking around, and you feel like you want to touch everything. So it's kind of a little perk that we give to the fans, but it's not a game, it's a technical demo.
Okay, thank you. So just when are we going to play this game?
You're going to play this game in August
23rd, I believe.
Bam.
Thank you very much.
I don't care that they only speak in whispers. I won't let them have the last word.